The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
What a crazy weekend. Just unbelievable. At the top of the list of news over the weekend, Donald Trump's executive order, a temporary ban of immigrants from 7 Muslim-majority countries from entering the United States for the next 90 days. This has been called the Protecting the Nation from Foreign Terrorist Entry into the United States. Doesn't really roll off the tongue, doesn't really matter, because what matters is what it does. A senior White House official said that this is just a first step towards a broader permanent ban that Donald Trump would like. The 7 countries on the list: Iraq, Syria, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. Very interesting, not only the countries on the list, but the countries not on the list, and we'll get to that a little bit later. This was the same list of countries named in a 2016 law concerning immigration visas as countries of concern under President Obama. Many false equivalencies from Trumpians saying Obama did the same thing. Incorrect, completely different circumstances. And this also suspends the admission of refugees for 4 months. A reduced number of refugees who could eventually be admitted into the U.S., depending on how this goes, is now at 50,000 compared to 110,000 per year under President Obama. Here's the question. If you are a devoted Trumpist who thinks this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, are you happy with eventually setting a cap at 50,000? I mean, if 1 terrorist can wreak havoc and 10 can pull off truly massive attacks, are you satisfied if your glorious orange leader reduces the number from 110,000 to 50,000? I don't know. That's a question that we will ultimately get to. Also, Syrian refugees banned, period, by this executive order. Some people still think that the ban is only on refugees. It is on all nationals from these countries seeking to come to the United States. And there's 4 ways, or really 3 ways to look at this. Number 1, is it legal, including constitutionality? Number 2, is it corrupt or self-serving to President Trump? And this is very important in the Trump era. And number 3, is this going to achieve the supposed goal of keeping America safe? Those are the 3 areas I want to dig into. And we'll start with the, is it in line with American law and values, constitutionality, etc. Before I get into the detail, right? The current vice president is on record as having said that this is unconstitutional. He's not a legal expert, but just to remind you of Mike Pence's opinion about this, remember when he tweeted in December of 2015, calls to ban Muslims from entering the U.S. are offensive and unconstitutional. Let's get into the constitutionality. This is indeed a violation of the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. It prohibits the government from favoring one religion over another. Now, you might hear this as a devoted Trumpian and say, but David, this is based on country of origin, not religion. But Trump sort of screws himself here because the order directs the Secretary of State, quote, in consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security, to, after this temporary period, make changes to the extent permitted by law to prioritize refugee claims made by individuals on the basis of religious-based persecution, provided that they are members of a minority religion in the individual's country of nationality, meaning that eventually Trump has already said, I will start allowing religious persecution-based refugees as long as they're not the majority religion in the countries, meaning as long as they are not Muslims. And it's very transparent what this is all about.
And I don't think he's fooling anyone because he said on the campaign trail that he wanted to issue a temporary ban on Muslims entering the United States. And then he went to Rudy Giuliani and said, how do we make this done legally?
Right.
And then, of course, it seems like he's going to give preference to Christian refugees entering the United States.
So the effect of this, even if it is not in a literal sense a Muslim ban, is particularly on would-be Muslim immigrants. It's not just the First Amendment that this violates. The Fifth Amendment's Due Process Clause also contains an equal protection component, which bars discrimination on the basis of religion. That just bolsters the Establishment Clause claim. And now you might hear me say all of that stuff and say, David, you know what? Constitutional law is really up to interpretation. Courts would have to see it through. You would have to get a challenge withstanding, and it might be a long time until we know the constitutionality. Throw away the Constitution into the trash, which I know Republicans usually don't want to do, but maybe now they do. We've had laws like this immigration ban at different moments in history. In the late 1800s, starting with Chinese immigrants, almost all Japanese were at one point effectively banned. Then all Asians in what was called the Asiatic barred zone. In 1924, Congress passed a national origin system. All of this type of thing was banned in 1965 by the Immigration and Nationality Act, which said no discrimination against immigrants on the basis of national origin. So if you don't believe this is about religion, we have law from 1965 that says you can't discriminate in terms of immigrants on the basis of national origin. Now, Trump has been asked about this, Pat, and he said, well, there's this 1952 law that allows the president to suspend the entry of any class of aliens that he finds are detrimental to the interest of the U.S. What he forgets is that based on our understanding of time moves forward, and 1965 came after 52 and made the 52 rule irrelevant.
Yeah, I think the other unfortunate thing here, too, is that it's a 90-day ban. So by the time the courts really get to examining this, it could be up by then.
It could be up. It could have been, there could be another one that has slightly different language. Who knows what's going to go on? And by the way, you can recognize, to preempt you know who, you can recognize that radical Islamic terrorism around the world is a problem, but still realize that this policy is illegal, unconstitutional, not useful. You can also recognize that many of these countries ban Israeli citizens' entry to the country outright, which is absurd and exactly what I'm criticizing here. And I'm critical of that as well. But you can still think that this policy is illegal, unconstitutional, and counterproductive. Let's now move on to the issue of corruption. The number two issue we have to look at with Trump's immigration ban from majority Muslim nations is it corrupt? Question that has never been more important in terms of the U.S. presidency than in the Trump era. Just as interesting as the countries included on the list, 7 countries, are the countries not included. Let's take a look at a map first before we get into this. You'll notice that not included are Egypt, for example. Oh, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, for example, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, etc. A total coincidence that many of these countries are ones that Donald Trump has done business with. If you believe in the concept of a Muslim majority nation immigration ban, how on earth do you justify not putting Saudi Arabia on that list, the primary source of 9/11 terrorist hijackers? And to understand the Trump Muslim ban list, you have to also understand the "we've got oil" list. You've got to understand the "we do business with Trump" list. Many of these countries have some combination of oil, past business dealings with Donald Trump, or the possibility of business dealings with Trump. Let's put up the table, and I'll describe. There's a few sections here. We've got 3 columns. Is the country on Trump's Muslim ban list? Have there been people from those countries involved in attacks on U.S. soil? And have these countries done business or consider doing business with Donald Trump? You'll notice that Iraq, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen are on Trump's list, yet none of those countries have had people involved in attacks on U.S. soil, and none of those countries have had or considered doing business with Donald Trump. Then, though, we get to Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Lebanon, and the United Arab Emirates, which are not on the list, have all had terrorists involved in attacks on U.S. soil. And 2 of those, Saudi Arabia and Egypt, have done business with Donald Trump. Trump has significant commercial interests in Turkey, also Azerbaijan, which is not on the list. Trump has done business there. You'll remember that the terrorists in the 9/11 attacks were from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Lebanon, and the United Arab Emirates. None of those 4 countries are on the list. Trump has explored developing properties in Dubai. The United Arab Emirates is, of course, not on the list, has had nationals participate in terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. And then Saudi Arabia is particularly interesting because they are one of the most oppressive regimes in the world, partially because we know Donald Trump registered 8 companies in Saudi Arabia during the presidential election. During an August 21st rally, Trump, the same day Trump created 4 of those corporations, he talked about how well he gets along with Saudi Arabia. Earlier this year, Trump said on Fox News he would want to protect Saudi Arabia. Trump's 7-country ban, Pat, and this is so key, would have blocked 0 of the 19 9/11 hijackers.
I think it's really just appealing to his base, too, because I think most people in the right wing get a sense that those from Iraq, Iran, Syria aren't people that they're going to be compatible with. But when it comes to, I guess, Saudi Arabia, they're just fine with it, or they're not educated on the points that they have corrupting influences, too.
Yeah, it's a complete PR optics move. It is not a move to keep America objectively safe, and I'll deal with that a little bit later. It does happen to be a terrible PR stunt with real people suffering the consequences. And because with Trump, everything is projection, everything he accused Hillary Clinton of is something he's guilty of himself. Recall that during the presidential campaign, Trump would often slam Hillary for accepting money from Saudi Arabia for the Clinton Foundation. What is more corrupt than saying to keep America safe, we're going to ban immigrants from majority Muslim countries, not Saudi Arabia, which was the main source of 9/11 hijackers. And oh, by the way, I also do business with them. And oh, by the way, we have shared oil interests with Saudi Arabia. Absolute and total kleptocratic, oligarchical, crony capitalist corruption. Absolutely despicable. The last aspect of the Trump Muslim majority country immigration ban I want to discuss is, will it achieve the supposed goal? And I say supposed because we've already talked about how it's absolute and total PR stunt optics. Will the majority Muslim immigration ban achieve the supposed goal of keeping America safe? The answer is no. This becomes and already has become a terrorist recruiting talking point. It is the #1 terrorist recruiting talking point right now. The U.S. has banned Muslims or people from our country or whatever. Join up. Let's go attack them. And I want to go further. If you believe, as many Trumpians do, and this may be true, I'm not denying that it may be true, that there are cells, radical jihadist cells in the U.S. who may have been born here as citizens of the U.S. or have long since legally come to the United States. If you believe that there are these cells ready to be activated, this ban does nothing than to provide an impetus to activate those cells sooner than later. And jihadist groups are already using this to their advantage. There's a report this morning in the Washington Post that a number of jihadist groups are calling this a victory. There are comments on pro-ISIS social media saying that this will make it easier to get people to side with extremists. One post hailed Trump's ban as the best call, or Donald Trump himself as the best caller to Islam. Several postings suggested that Trump was fulfilling the predictions of Anwar al-Awlaki, the American-born al-Qaeda leader. This doesn't keep America safe, Pat.
I mean, it largely reminds me, too, of the drone strikes that we've been committing to. Thinking that it's going to keep us safe, but really you're just cropping the next generation of terrorists.
Obvious and, of course, also hypocritical, as I mentioned earlier, is that we didn't even ban the country from which the 9/11 terrorists primarily came from, Saudi Arabia, nor even the secondary countries. And there's also a logistical issue here that makes this even more obviously optics and politics to appeal to the lowest common denominator, the low information Trumpian. Libya is banned. We issued like 1,500 visas to Libya in 2015. We issued millions of visas to China comparatively, just not to bring China into this unnecessarily, but to give you a sense of the number of visas that we issued to some countries. Saudi Arabia, which is a Muslim majority country notably missing from the list, received 100,000 visas in 2015. Iraq is on the list. Only 10,000 visas went to people from Iraq. Yemen is on the list. Only 3,500 visas went to people from Yemen. Many of the countries banned, Pat, are also statistically almost irrelevant.
Yeah, this is entirely about optics. And I think to anyone who thought that Trump was not going to fall through with his rhetoric on the campaign trail, I mean, they've been proven wrong here.
Yeah, he did it. It just makes absolutely no sense and does not make America safer. And lastly, we have to consider the retaliation aspect. Iran said on Saturday it's going to stop U.S. citizens from entering their country in direct response here. And I know some people will say, oh, who cares? Who wants to go to Iran anyway? Yeah, I get that. But if it's Iran in this particular case, other countries could be added to the list. And even though it might not sound like a place to vacation, many of the countries on this list are important in terms of diplomacy. And this could become a really, really big issue. In 24 hours, the biggest sort of notable accomplishment of this thing is that Donald Trump single-handedly made people, number one, want to support yellow taxis in New York City as they were boycotting bringing people to JFK Airport. We could talk about whether that makes sense or not, but it's fascinating that people all of a sudden are like, hey, let's support yellow cabs in New York, which are often hated by many New Yorkers. And also it prompted people to show up at JFK Airport when they didn't even have to, which is also something that you generally want to avoid if you live in New York, ever having to go to JFK Airport because it is absolute chaos. Last thought on this. Could these attempts, the 20% tariff on Mexico, which I'll talk about, the Muslim majority country ban, etc., could these be Steve Bannon, Donald Trump attempts to propose something crazy initially so that then later they can back off of it slightly and people turn away and say, well, it's not as crazy as what they started with? For example, Muslim ban, cancel visas, deport people who were in the airport. And then later they sort of end up negotiating back to, okay, if you already have the visa, you can come here. If you've got a green card, you can come here, etc. But any future immigration is going to be banned. There's an interesting aspect to that where maybe this is really extreme on purpose to end up negotiating to something that will make people say, well, it's not as crazy as what we started with. I guess I won't worry about it anymore.
I think that's kind of generous. I don't know if they've had the foresight to think that the executive orders would have those kind of long-lasting implications.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're just kind of going through with what they can at this
feeling around in the dark, so to speak. Yeah, and that's been something we heard of, that the legal teams got this like a half hour before it was signed or something. What a show we have for you today. I'm on Twitter at @dpackman. Send me your thoughts.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Chris Tripp. Chris and so many other new David Pakman Show members clearly are feeling mobilized, coalesced by what is going on in American government. And I thank everybody, including Chris, for supporting this program. We're mostly funded by viewers like Chris. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Use the coupon code for a discount. I voted 17. Okay, the Trump 20% vague proposal of a tariff in order to get Mexico to sort of de facto pay for the Mexican wall is an absolute and total disaster. We have this proposed 20% tariff on the import of all goods from Mexico to pay for the wall. Mexico-U.S. trade is no small thing. Some right-wingers think it doesn't matter what we do with Mexican trade because it's not big. It's actually huge. It would have a major impact on the American economy if it was disrupted. The U.S.'s third biggest trading partner is Mexico, 1.4 billion two-way trade daily. Common goods produced, produce, cars, vehicle parts, computers, machines, avocados falls under produce, something that could escalate in price significantly if we start a trade war with Mexico. And this was after both Donald Trump and the Mexican president, Nieto, pulled out of a meeting because the Mexican president said that Mexico's just not going to pay for the wall, and then the meeting was canceled. When that happened, I was wondering, Pat, if Trump has been campaigning about what a great negotiator and deal maker he is, why would you bail on the meeting with the Mexican president when they say they wouldn't pay for the wall? Show up and negotiate. He says he's this great negotiator. Don't cancel the meeting. Show up and prove how great of a negotiator he is. Yeah,
I'd imagine the first step of reaching a deal would have to be getting those two people in the same room.
Right.
I guess he could justify, well, I can put it off till later, but chop, we got to pay for this.
So this has obviously strained U.S.-Mexico relations. It violates NAFTA. Fine. Trump says he's going to renegotiate or pull out of NAFTA. Hasn't happened yet. And basic economics, the most basic economics, tells us that U.S. consumers and companies are going to be mostly affected by the consequences of this tariff, especially in American border states, U.S. companies that have factories on both sides of the border. Large amounts of goods imported from Mexico come from goods originating in the United States. So this threatens trade that is crucial to our American manufacturing companies, and including industries that Trump says he wants to help, the automobile industry, manufacturing of all sorts, etc. This will actually hurt U.S. global competitiveness, and it will also hurt jobs. And it will also allow China to come in and win again even more, which is what Donald Trump said he would stop as president of the United States. The other issue is that Mexico could respond with its own tariffs. It could respond with boycotts of American companies, which are happening. And John McCain, Republican senator from Arizona, still somehow, ironically, the voice of reason, saying, quote, the free flow of trade has been the foundation of U.S. economic policy for decades and a major factor in prosperity and greatness. And then we also have Senator Lindsey Graham, who said, quote, simply put, any policy proposal which drives up costs of Corona, tequila, or margaritas is a big time bad idea, mucho sad. Of course, sort of a joke, but it actually does get at the problem here. Not only are prices going to be driven up, which is bad, again, not so much for the rich, but for the lower and middle income people. If avocados go up in price 20%, rich people aren't really going to be affected. Lower and middle income people are going to be affected. There's also a Mexican food activist group that is saying, that's it, we're boycotting McDonald's, Walmart, Coca-Cola, Starbucks. And yes, not only are those companies employing people at their home offices in the US, I know that they also employ Mexican workers. That's more of a reason as to why these so-called trade war policies can be so unpredictable, because we have a global economy.
We're in a very bad position. I mean, best case scenario is that the cost of the wall gets put on the U.S. taxpayers and our consumers. The worst case scenario is a trade war, and this is all to support a wall that's really just not popular among the American public. Not
popular, and also would not be effective. It's, again, as I said last week, solutions that don't work for problems that don't exist. A lot of people emailed me, and they kind of like that. I do see it as the sort of motto, the de facto motto of the Trump administration. Donald Trump has done something very, very disturbing. He signed a memo reorganizing the National Security Council, and he has promoted former CEO of Breitbart News, Steve Bannon, to being a regular attendee at the Principals Committee meeting of the National Security Council. To give you a sense of what the National Security Council does and what it is, this is the primary venue where the President of the United States considers national security and foreign policy issues with senior national security advisors and cabinet officials. This is the a council that helps the president make decisions about national security. And former Breitbart CEO Stephen Bannon is now going to be a top advisor to the president on these matters. In contrast, who is being slightly pushed out to make room for Steve Bannon? The director of national intelligence and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff are only going to attend these meetings now, Pat, when issues directly relevant to them are going to be discussed. For comparison, under Barack Obama, do you miss him yet? The director of national intelligence and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs attended all meetings about of the National Security Council, which makes sense. And there's an article from this morning from the Washington Post called "Questions Multiply Over Bannon's Role in the Trump Administration." This is the most understated headline, maybe, of the presidency. Questions like "What the F is going on here?" are the type of questions that are surfacing.
Could you imagine if President Obama took off the DNI or the director of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from the National Security Council and put someone on there like David Axelrod? There would be outrage, and rightfully so.
Well, David Axelrod would sometimes show up, right? He would sometimes show up at these meetings to provide a little bit of a layer of maybe the political implications or something like that. But the idea of putting David Axelrod on there as a permanent member and then saying DNI out, chairman of the Joint Chiefs out. Steve Bannon is a professional propagandist, right? He's the alt-right sweetheart with no experience whatsoever in national security. This is part of the war on intel. Trump maintains the media created this so-called conflict between Trump and the heads of the intel community, but Trump loves the staff. If you boot out the people who are there to communicate the intel obtained by the staff, you're not really sending the message that you love the work of the lower level intel staff. And not surprisingly, again, Republican Senator John McCain, who is the new voice of reason of the Republican Party, although he still says crazy stuff on a weekly basis, he said that this makes no sense. It doesn't take a liberal to realize that this is a train wreck, and some Republicans get it too. John McCain saying, we have the quote here on CBS Face the Nation yesterday, "I'm worried about the National Security Council. Who are the members of it and who are the permanent members? The appointment of Mr. Bannon is something which is a radical departure from any National Security Council in history. The role of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has been diminished, I understand, with this reorganization. The one person who is indispensable would be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in my view. Well, yeah, Bannon has no job experience in foreign policy. He was in the Navy, then he went to Goldman Sachs, then he did documentary filmmaking, and then he ran Breitbart News, a far-right website that peddles conspiracy theories. Since when does running an alt-right news website make you more of an asset to the president's national security team than the director of national intelligence? You hear all the time about how the left doesn't support the military. I'd much rather the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff be advising the president on national security than Steve Bannon. Small question. I know stuff like the law doesn't really matter anymore, but how can Steve Bannon even be on the NSC without the consent of the Senate? Take a look at this. This is from these are rules from the 50 U.S. Code, Section 3021 on the National Security Council. The council should be composed of the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, the secretary of defense, the secretary of energy, and the secretaries and undersecretaries of other executive departments and of the military departments when appointed by the president and with by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to serve as at his pleasure. Doesn't somebody have some oversight over Steve Bannon being on this thing according to the law?
I mean, you'd hope so. Ideally, your political strategists and the people in charge of the National Security Council would be kind of separated. I can see sometimes there could be an overlap there,
Sure.
but you have to wonder if there's an ulterior motive here.
And again, this could all be part of this idea of doing really extreme stuff so that then when Trump negotiates back to something slightly less crazy, people forget and look the other way. Donald Trump is already in the presidential record books. He has set the record for how quickly after being inaugurated, he got more than 50% of the country to disapprove of the job that he's doing. These numbers are stunning from the Gallup survey. They've measured presidential approval for decades. Donald Trump hit 51% disapproval on Saturday over the weekend, 8 days after being inaugurated. And we have the trend line to show you popping up over the 50% disapproval mark on Saturday. Check out how that stacks up versus past presidents. Here is how long it took past presidents to achieve 50% disapproval. This graphic is just insane. 727 days for Ronald Reagan, 1,336 days for Bush 1 to get to 50% disapproval, 573 days for Bill Clinton, 1,205 for Bush 2, 936 days until President Obama got to 50% disapproval, and 8, not 800, not 80, 8 days until Donald Trump was at 50% disapproval. Talk about fake polling, blah, blah, blah. We don't trust Gallup. This is apples to apples. This has been done by the same organization for a long time, dating back to Ronald Reagan. For Bush 2, it stayed there for most of the presidency. It was really quite a disturbing thing. And this is logical because it's been minor PR victories hidden in totally plutocratic executive orders that are not going to help the average person. And I don't know whether Trump cares about approval ratings. On the one hand, he says he's going to do what he wants to do. On the other hand, we know he's so thin-skinned that maybe he does care, but he'll just write it all off as fake news. I don't know.
I think he does care, but he's going to try to play it off like he doesn't. I mean, I think going into his presidency, the poll numbers were kind of artificially high because a lot of people thought, well, I'm going to give him a chance.
Oh, yeah.
But, several days later, he started talking about inaugural crowd size and
Right.
started proposing the wall and the Muslim ban, and people are not going to get behind that.
Yeah, the approval hasn't moved much from inauguration, but the disapproval has absolutely gone up. People saying, yeah, I just don't approve of what he's doing. And many Republicans are also jumping on the bandwagon. John McCain, Lindsey Graham, but even other Republicans vocally speaking out against the immigration ban. So a new record set by Donald Trump in the history books. Next, let's see if a libertarian-minded former vice presidential nominee likes what Donald Trump is doing.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Wayne Allyn Root is the former Libertarian Party's vice presidential nominee. It's been a while since we spoke to him. And, you know, Wayne, I was kind of bummed out this morning preparing for the interview because I was ready for you to come on and explain how, you know, Donald Trump is not in line with libertarian beliefs and free market beliefs. And this morning, I got this video from Right Wing Watch with you saying that Donald Trump is the greatest conservative president in history, which not only did it seem hyperbolic for 8 days into the presidency, but also it seemed like it just fundamentally doesn't line up with your worldview. I mean, what has attracted you so much to Donald Trump, given your libertarian background?
Well, first of all, don't forget, I'm not trying to fit him in, a round peg into a square hole. Nothing in that article said he's the most libertarian president in the history of America. I said after 7 days, after 1 week in office, it was written last week, he was on his way to becoming the most conservative president, the greatest conservative president in American history. In 1 week, he did a lot of amazing things for conservatives from a conservative perspective. I didn't get involved in libertarian aspect of it, but I think when it comes to business and capitalism and conservative values, this guy is fantastic. He's more conservative than any liberal would have ever imagined when they said day and night, oh, he's not what he says he is. He's just pretending he's a New York liberal who gave checks to Schumer and Clinton. And I knew, because I had a friendship with Donald Trump, that he was actually very conservative and very pro-business.
Okay, fine. But what I'd like to focus on is sort of the interaction between the policies and your free market beliefs. And before we jump into that, I mean, you still are a free market guy, right? Even though you're talking about conservatism, but you were the Libertarian Party's vice presidential nominee, and you're big on the free market, right?
I am, but you're probably going to focus now. I could smell what's coming, David.
Yeah.
You're going to focus on free trade, and that's a very small part of what I was talking about. 90% of what I'm talking about has nothing to do with free trade. It was
No, that's fine. I mean, listen, we don't have to talk about free trade. Obviously, you know, tariffs on Mexico, the prevention of free movement of labor and products, that we could talk about that, but let's skip that. I mean, like, for example, how does free market libertarian leaning Wayne Allyn Root react to President Trump giving money to Carrier in a way that is completely against allowing the free market to decide where it's best for Carrier to do business? That's the government getting very, very involved in private business, isn't it? How could you support that as someone who believes in the free market?
Listen, Trump, before he became president, the 2 months between being elected and taking the oath of office, in those 2 months, he was the most active president-elect and president-to-be in the history of America. And he was active with one thing: keeping jobs in America. He ran on that platform any way he could. He would keep jobs in America, keep them from moving offshore.
But just not the free market, though.
I don't think giving tax cuts to somebody, tax breaks, is the same thing, David, as anti-free market or free trade or its government involvement. When you let me keep more of my own money, that's a tax break.
Okay, right. But Wayne. Okay. Let's just step back for a second, though, okay? And here, I think that this is where it's important to focus not on whether we call it a tax break or a handout or whatever. What I wanted you to explain to me is, what is the overarching free market principle that defends hand-selecting companies to give money to, right? You're not changing the broader economic conditions. You're saying, hey, here's one company that I want to announce we save jobs with. Take money. And whether it's a tax cut or a credit or a giveaway or free stuff, whatever it is, that's not free market policy to pick one company and give them money.
All I'm going to argue to you is it's a mindset. We've had 8 years of Obama. I said this in my last interview with you. My last interview with you, I remember saying, my business can't survive this guy. He's a disaster. And
wait a second. Yes, let's talk about that, Wayne. Let's
rewarding successful people. That's not a bad thing. That's a great thing.
Pat, please bring the Advil. Oh my goodness, Wayne. But let me talk about that for a second. Let me talk about that. I interviewed. Hold on a second, Wayne. Hold on a second. I interviewed you a bunch of times during the Obama presidency, and every single time you were talking about how your businesses were getting killed by President Obama. Right. Hold on. And here we are. President Trump has been here for 7 days. You must have just barely avoided declaring bankruptcy after those 8 years of Obama, right? I mean, just in time, Trump came in and swooped in and saved your businesses.
You're laughing because you think that might be some sort of a joke, when in reality it's true. It actually is true. My businesses, everything I'm involved in, is so far down that it's a disaster, and I didn't know how I could hang on much longer.
What's
And
crazy
thank
though
God
is
Trump
if
is
that's
here.
true, Wayne, you'd think you would have downsized your office or maybe gotten some cheaper suits, but everything looks, at least in this shot, it's the exact same that it's been for 8 years that I've been interviewed you. It seems if you were almost on the edge of losing everything, it's certainly not reflected by everything I'm reading and seeing about you. And what has changed now in the last 7 days to save your businesses?
Well, how about today? How about as we do this interview today, Donald Trump signed an executive order that freezes, there will be no new regulations in the year 2017.
Okay.
But more importantly, every time there's a new regulation, he's asked every agency to cut 2 regulations for every 1 new one. This is music to a businessman's ears. This is the greatest news I've ever heard in my entire adult life. Ever.
Hey,
Ever.
Wayne, I want to have this conversation sort of in a more abstract, politically philosophical way. During the run up to Donald Trump's election, one of the sort of trends was Trump stated that he can fix every problem, right? And he even said, we have problems that I alone can fix. That is fundamentally the opposite of free market libertarian ideals. He's saying government with me as president is the solution to every problem. No libertarian believes that, do they?
Listen, you're asking me questions that philosophically I
make
would
perfect
agree with.
sense.
In reality, you've got a brilliant billionaire businessman who outmaneuvered 16 brilliant Republican politicians, proving my argument in all of my prior books.
Oh, yeah? Which one was brilliant?
Politicians can't compete with businessmen or women. They're not even on the same page. We run rings around them, and you got to put a businessman or woman in charge of America. It'll make a big difference.
But that's not an answer. That's not an answer, though.
I agree with you. Philosophically, I want less government, and if that means a government brilliant politician who runs government shouldn't be involved, and he should let the free market do what the free market does. Theoretically, that's exactly right. In reality, that's what Donald Trump, as a strong president, will do. He'll kill government and get it out of the way. I love the fact, the very thing you hate is what I love. He's put people in charge of every cabinet position who hate the cabinet agency they're in charge of, want to downsize it, or kill it completely and make it go away.
But that aside, I mean, it's insane to say that you should put people in charge who want to destroy the agencies they're running. But let's just take one example, though. Let's take one example and step aside from Rick Perry's running the department he thinks shouldn't exist and you love it. Here's just one example, okay? Gary Cohn is one of Trump's top economic advisors.
I know he is, Goldman Sachs.
Okay. No, forget about Goldman Sachs, though. It's the idea that he was a huge recipient of government bailout money during the 2008 crisis. He is the epitome of taxpayer money being given to companies, again, so that they will avoid what might be a free market that dictates they would face a bankruptcy. As a free market guy, how can you support that?
Let me give you my answer. First of all, I've weighed in on pretty much every Donald Trump cabinet appointment, and I've said again and again in the media, I love them all except for Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, because they're Goldman Sachs guys, and I personally am not a fan of Goldman Sachs or Wall Street for that matter, and their manipulation and their influence on government. So I'll let it just sit there and we'll see. My guess is Donald Trump's brilliant. I've never disagreed with any decision so far that he's made. So he probably knows things I don't know, and probably he's put people in charge of the swamp who understand how to beat the swamp and drain it because they've been part of it. My guess is that was his thinking, and we'll soon find out. That's all I can say.
Are you a busy day over at Root Enterprises today? I can tell. Hey, are you against the 20% tariff on Mexico? I mean, as a free market guy, I'm sure you understand how that will just make products more expensive in the United States. Trade wars rarely benefit the little guy. I'm sure you're against that, right?
Once again, I'm on record as saying it's nothing new on your show. I've written many times and I've said many times in the media that I, in general, support free market, NAFTA, things like that sound great. The words free trade sound great. But what if it's a lie? What if the name is a misnomer? Okay,
but that's not what but Wayne, the question is a different one. The question is a different one. The question is, as a guy who purports to understand economics, You agree a 20% tariff on Mexican goods makes products more expensive for Americans, and it only creates a situation in which Mexico can then counteract by either boycotting American companies, not allowing cheaper production of you get how it backfires, right?
I get how it can backfire, and I always have argued that Herbert Hoover exasperated the Great Depression by dramatically raising taxes and using tariffs.
Wait,
and using tariffs
exasperated?
as well. As well. Regulations, taxes, and tariffs are what Hoover did to exasperate the Great Depression. However, in this case, China, India, and
now
Mexico are clobbering American business and American jobs, and something's got to be done to level the playing field. And we have allowed Mexico to walk all over us for 20 years now, and something's got to be done. And my guess is, I've said this again and again, I don't believe you're ever going to see for a long period of time tariffs by Trump on either India, Mexico, or China. He's going to threaten or he's going to implement them for a short period, and they will be brought to their knees, and then they will come back to the table and negotiate a much more beneficial deal for the American people. This guy's a brilliant negotiator, Donald Trump. And I have faith in him. I really do. I think it's all going to work out for the best.
Well, there's definitely been an exacerbation of my exasperation with this conversation. That I think we could all be sure of. Wayne Allyn Root, former Libertarian Party vice presidential nominee. It's all happening today at Root Enterprises. Thanks so much for talking to me. It's always interesting.
Yes, and if you want my opinion, just go to the website, rootforamerica.com. I weigh in on everything, and I'm not shy, and I don't change my opinions and flip-flop depending on the interview I'm on.
Right.
And I am for free trade, but I think it's a misnomer. Most free trade deals are not free trade. They screw over American workers, and I'm sick of it, and I was fed up with it, and that's why I supported Donald Trump for president. And now he's doing exactly what he said he'd do. I love the guy. I think it's going to be great.
Hey, what day do you predict America will be great again? Have you forecast that?
Well, to be honest with you, in the last week, it's feeling pretty good to me.
So it's already happened. It's happened quick. Wow.
It's already happening. It's not happened. It's not in past tense. We're not great yet, back to the old days, but we're getting there. Everything's in motion to make America great again, safe again, and prosperous again.
All right. If Wayne Allyn Root has convinced you, please let me know. Send me an email. We'll take a break back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This is a real story. It almost sounds fake, but it's all too real, and things are getting insane. Remember that Trump blackmail file, which was researched and assembled by highly regarded former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele? He didn't do it alone, right? And one of the people who helped him put that file together is former Russian KGB chief Oleg Erevinkin. And as a reminder, this is the dossier that talks about Trump hiring prostitutes to participate in all sort of urinary fetish stuff. I mean, this entire thing, right, that Russia's been cultivating Trump for 5 years, that there were sweetener business deals offered to Trump, that entire thing. This is almost giving me the chills. This guy was found dead in the back of his car in Moscow under what are being called suspicious circumstances. Erevinkin was a key aide to Igor Setkin, a former deputy prime minister who's named in this dossier several times. Erevinkin's body was found in a black Lexus. An investigation started. Erevinkin's body was sent to the FSB morgue. There's been no cause of death confirmed initially. The FBI is investigating. Later, we heard, he died of a heart attack. There doesn't really need to be an investigation. And by the way, like I told you a couple of weeks ago, Christopher Steele is still in hiding following his unmasking as the author of that Trump dossier. This is massive, and corporate media is basically silent on this.
I mean, it's just the next sketchy chapter in these so far unconfirmed reports. We know that Russia has a history of going after its political opponents.
Oh, coincidence.
If this guy got in the way of them having influence over American politics, of course, that he's going to be enemy number one.
A Russian spy helps the Brits put together a dossier about Donald Trump, and he's found dead in the back of his own car in Russia, and we're supposed to believe it was just a heart attack. You really can't write this stuff. I feel almost like I'm doing Alex Jones InfoWars, except this is actually a real story here. Very, very disturbing. Authoritarianism experts are very concerned about Donald Trump's first days as president. And my reaction when I read this report was, you don't need to be an expert in authoritarianism to realize what's going on here. You're seeing the centralization of power. You're seeing authoritarian leadership bolstered by emotional attachment by supporters, Trumpists to a T, and a sort of accommodating or lenient party that is open to at least not criticizing really, really despicable elements of the political fray. And then, of course, otherizing or demonizing immigrants in other countries, exactly what we're seeing under the Trump administration. Donald Trump says he wants to make America great again by building up the military and parading the military into the streets. Again, very concerning if you understand the history of authoritarian leadership. He staged a press conference where his press secretary just went out and blatantly lied to the media. He told the National Park Service to stop tweeting, effectively a gag order. He met with an American intelligence agency in what's described as an uncomfortable meeting, where he brought in his own supporters to clap while he slammed the media and lied about inauguration turnout. The term alternative facts through his counselor and former campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, the same Kellyanne Conway who went on NBC and threatened Chuck Todd with cutting off access to the presidential team if he keeps asking questions that she doesn't want to answer. Very, very concerning, and authoritarianism experts are pointing to this combination of actions.
And I think what may be most telling is the fact that he's issuing all these executive orders, even though he has control of both houses of Congress. So it's really not about getting the most effective legislation passed. It's about power.
And not only is Trump passing executive orders when he controls, obviously, the White House, the House and Senate are all Republican, he also criticized President Obama for use of the mechanism known as the executive order. And then I can't forget about the direction to the EPA, charged with environmental protection, to remove all references to climate change and climate data collected with taxpayer money from the EPA website. So serious concerns here about authoritarianism. Yes, the line between authoritarianism and totalitarianism is there's a large chasm. Chasm? Is it chasm? I think it's chasm. Yeah. I can't even speak correctly here.
It's written as chasm, but it's chasm.
It's chasm, yeah, because it's not chaos, it's chaos, right?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, I guess we don't know. No. It's obviously chaos, that I know. It's bad, folks. It's really, really bad. And, 1984 by George Orwell back on the bestseller list. It's all happening here. And academic experts on authoritarianism are very, very much concerned. I get it. We are going to link to the study that I'm referring to here. We have a voicemail number today from someone who is absolutely, completely, utterly unhinged. That's all I'll say. Let's listen to it together.
You got one hell of a nerve making fun of Republicans, man. Why don't you look at you frickin' Democrats? They're the one that caused all this illegal alien shit. Yeah, your program stinks.
Right? I don't know that I even have a comment.
She's fired up and ready to go.
She's fired up and ready to go, no doubt about it. On the bonus show today, an update on the David Pakman Show on Amazon Prime. An exciting update and an opportunity for the audience to participate in that exciting expansion. I will talk about more protests over the weekend at airports here in Boston at Copley Square. How long will it go on, et cetera, et cetera. I also want to talk about very strange set of circumstances where, as a result of the New York City yellow cab drivers, they drive yellow cabs. They're not yellow drivers. I just want to be super clear there. I could see how that could be taken out of context. Drivers of yellow cabs in New York City were refusing to take passengers to JFK Airport in support of the protest against the immigration ban. Uber made a move that was sort of like a strike-breaking move, and then Lyft came back in and is donating $1 million to the ACLU and is supportive of those protesting the immigration ban. So I want to talk about all of that on the bonus show today. I will remind you that David Pakman Show coffee is almost ready to go on sale. I am finalizing the final last details in the next day or two, and I really look forward to telling you about that. You can also get instant access to the bonus show by signing up at davidpakman.com/membership. The normal rates are really low. We're talking about pennies a day. But if that is too high for some of our viewers, I don't want the price to be a barrier to growing our subscriber base. So use the coupon code IVoted17. You can use the coupon code IVoted17 on the membership of your choice. It'll give you a huge discount. That's what people are telling me anyway. And then you will get instant access to the bonus show, which starts in mere seconds.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.